started with a whisper, not the kind you hear with your ears, but the kind that stirs something ancient inside your bones. There was a man, let's call him Elias. In his early 60s, Elias had lived what many would call a successful life: 2 kids, a decent home, a career in engineering, and an unblemished reputation. But one afternoon, after a routine medical exam revealed a shadow in his lungs, everything changed. Not because he was told it was fatal, it wasn't, but because, for the first time in decades, he paused. And in that pause, something cracked. It wasn't fear, it wasn't despair. It was a simple question that rose like smoke from a quiet fire within. Is this all there is? Elias began to feel like he was living a life that didn't fully belong to him. Days blurred together. He noticed how scripted it all felt. Wake, drive, work, nod, eat, sleep, repeat. He had chased stability his whole life, only to realize he'd built a house on sand. That night, Elias did something he hadn't done in years. He sat in silence. No TV, no phone, just himself. And in that silence, he felt the edges of something greater. He wouldn't know it then, but Elias was brushing against a quantum shift. You see, we live in an ocean of infinite potential, but most of us paddle around in the same familiar puddle, convinced it's all there is. What quantum shift offers is not a shortcut, not a trick of thought or a cosmic vending machine. It's a remembering, a return, a recalibration of your entire system, mind, body, and frequency, so deeply that the universe has no choice but to respond in kind. But let's take a step back. What do we really mean when we say quantum shift? Forget the buzzwords for a moment. Forget manifestation TikToks and glittery YouTube thumbnails. At its core, quantum shift is the process of becoming someone so aligned with a new reality, so attuned to its frequency, that reality itself must rearrange to match it. It's not about wishing, it's about wiring. Not about trying, but transforming. Modern physics has taught us that what we perceive as solid matter is, in fact, vibrating energy. At the subatomic level, everything, your chair, your body, your thoughts, is a storm of energy patterns. And what's more fascinating, these patterns behave differently when observed. That's not mysticism, that's quantum mechanics. Now apply that to your life. What if your current reality isn't a fixed track you're doomed to ride forever, but a probability field? And what if your thoughts, emotions, and beliefs are the steering wheel? This is where science meets the soul. Let me give you something tangible. A few years ago, a woman named Aria began writing in a journal every morning. Not affirmations, not goals. She wrote as if she were already living the life she envisioned. She didn't write, "I hope I'm financially free." She wrote, "I'm waking up in my quiet lakeside home, brewing coffee, and checking my messages from clients who pay me well to do meaningful work." At first, it felt ridiculous, or fake, but she kept doing it, not just writing it, living into it. She started dressing like the woman she imagined, speaking like her, taking small but intentional actions aligned with that identity. Within 18 months, Aria wasn't pretending anymore. The field responded, because the field always responds, not to fantasy, but to frequency. Most people get stuck because they're unknowingly sending out mixed signals. Their words say, "I want abundance," but their nervous system is still bracing for scarcity. Their mouth says, "I'm ready for love," but their body holds the tension of every betrayal it hasn't healed from. That's why thinking positive rarely works alone. The quantum doesn't listen to your declaration, it listens to your dominant vibration. And that vibration lives in your habits, your tone, your choices, and your silence. Quantum shift isn't something you do, it's someone you become. And that becoming is not loud or showy. It's often quiet, subtle. It happens when you choose integrity over ease, when you sit with discomfort instead of numbing it, when you stop trying to escape the moment and instead ask what this moment came to teach you. That's where the shift begins. And once it begins, the momentum builds. Elias, remember him? Within a year of his diagnosis, he had sold his house, moved into a small mountain cottage, and started painting for the first time since college. His health improved, not miraculously, gradually. But more importantly, he was alive again, not just breathing, living, because he wasn't stuck in an old script anymore. He had chosen a new frequency, and the quantum field listened. So why don't more people make this shift if it's truly available to everyone? And it is. Why do so many remain frozen in lives they no longer feel connected to? The answer is subtle, son, but it's everywhere. Comfort, not joy, not fulfillment, just the familiar dullness of what we already know. Most people would rather suffer predictably than risk transformation. They confuse safety with sameness and build emotional prisons with the bricks of routine. The bars, beliefs like "this is just how I am. It's too late to change. People like me don't get lives like that." What they don't realize is those beliefs aren't passive thoughts. They're active frequencies, broadcasts, and the quantum field isn't judging them. It's just echoing them over and over until you decide to break the loop. And the loop doesn't break with motivation. Motivation is unreliable. One bad night of sleep and it's gone. One harsh word from someone you love and it crumbles. The loop breaks with identity. With the moment you stop asking, "How do I fix this?" and start asking, "Who must I become so that this is no longer even a problem in my life?" That's not a mindset hack. That's a frequency reset. Because when you shift who you are at the root, the symptoms evaporate, not because they're solved, but because they no longer resonate with you. Let me take you deeper. There's a concept in neuroscience called neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to rewire itself based on repeated experience. Every thought you think strengthens a neural circuit. Every emotional reaction reinforces a pathway. So when you worry about the same problem every day, or replay the same heartbreak, or rehearse the same failure, you're not just remembering. You're installing a program that shapes your mood, your behavior, your destiny. Now consider this: if you can rehearse pain, what happens when you begin rehearsing possibility? Not imagining, rehearsing, walking, talking, breathing, and feeling as if the future you desire is already real. Because in the quantum field, it is. And your willingness to believe that, before evidence arrives, is what unlocks the shift. One of the clearest examples I've seen comes from a man named Daquan, a former U.S. Marine. After 2 tours and years of trauma, Daquan returned home emotionally shattered. Nightmares, anger outbursts, isolation. He was told he had complex PTSD, and that his only real hope was medication and management. But something in him resisted that story. He began reading quantum biology, Eastern mysticism, somatic therapy. Every morning, he sat in front of a mirror and whispered to himself, "I am not broken, I am becoming." At first, his hands would tremble when he said it. His body didn't believe it, but he kept going. He added breath work, cold plunges, journaling, visualization, not as tricks, but as tools to reprogram his nervous system. And slowly, that wounded soldier started to vanish. In his place stood a teacher. Now, Daquan leads trauma release retreats for veterans. Same man, different timeline, because he chose a new one. Quantum shift doesn't ask you to deny your pain. It asks you to stop identifying with it. Your story may include hardship, betrayal, loss, but you are not that story. You are the field in which the story unfolded. You are the awareness watching the movie. not the actor trapped inside it. And once you recognize that, you realize something radical. You can rewrite the script, not by changing the past, but by choosing who you are now. Because identity is not fixed, it's fluid. And the moment you say, "I no longer align with this version of me," the universe begins reassembling itself to accommodate that new decision. It won't be instant, but it will be inevitable if you remain consistent. Here's the part most people miss. The shift happens before the proof. You won't feel different immediately. Your world won't explode with miracles overnight. You might still wake up tired. You might still feel the old fears tugging at you. But that doesn't mean you're failing. It means your body is detoxing old timelines. Give it time, give it presence. Consistency in the unseen always precedes evidence in the seen. Just like seeds take time underground before they bloom, your new reality takes time in silence before it erupts into form. So be gentle, be patient. But don't be passive. You're not waiting for the universe to save you. You're becoming the version of you that never needed saving. That version already exists. You're just catching up to it. What does it mean to live in resonance with a new timeline? Most people assume it's about changing your habits. Waking up earlier, eating cleaner, saying the right things to the mirror. But those are only surface ripples. The deeper shift happens far beneath the threshold of words and actions. It happens when your nervous system, the part of you that flinches before thought, starts to feel safe in a new vibration. Because that's the real prison, the subconscious fear of expansion. The human mind says, "I want growth," but the body whispers, "But what if we lose everything?" And the field listens to the whisper. This is why so many people start spiritual journeys and then sabotage them. Not because they're lazy, not because they're weak, but because their physiology is still loyal to their past. They are trying to manifest joy through a body addicted to stress. That's like planting a flower in concrete and expecting it to bloom. You must soften the ground first. You must let go of the identity built on hypervigilance, on control, on proving your worth through doing. You must allow yourself to receive a reality you've never known, without needing to earn it. That is the shift. This is why so much of real transformation feels like loss. Because you're not just changing your thoughts, you're dying to an older version of you. And grief always follows death. Even when the death is necessary, even when it's sacred. That's why you may feel exhausted in the early days of the shift, why your body aches, why you question if you're going backwards. You're not regressing, you're releasing. The identity that fought to survive. The identity that was shaped by abandonment, or pressure, or silence. The one that was built to endure, now being asked to expand. And expansion feels terrifying when all you've known is contraction. But you must trust that discomfort is not the enemy. It is the birth canal of your becoming. Let me tell you about someone else. Her name is Lena. For years, Lena lived in a loop of scarcity. She grew up hearing, "Money doesn't grow on trees," and watching her parents work themselves into the ground just to survive. So even as she became a professional coach, she unconsciously undercharged, overgave, and burned out. Every time a new client came, she felt dread, not because she didn't love the work, but because her nervous system was wired to believe that more clients equals more stress, equals more collapse. No business strategy could fix that. Only somatic healing could. So Lena began doing something radical. She stopped numbing. She stopped pretending she was okay, and she sat with her discomfort. She let her body shake, cry, tremble. She met her fear in the silence. And through that surrender, something broke open. She stopped chasing success, and it started arriving. Clients began to show up who honored her boundaries. She no longer felt guilt in receiving. She didn't become successful. She became available for success. there's a difference. That's the quantum principle most people overlook. It's not about effort, it's about access. You're not creating the new timeline, it already exists. You're simply aligning with it. And alignment isn't about perfection, it's about resonance. Do your thoughts, your tone, your posture, your choices all sing the same song? Or are you saying one thing while living another because the field doesn't hear your affirmations? It hears your vibration. It hears the choices you make when no one is watching. It hears the way you speak to yourself when you fail. And it mirrors that back to you, without judgment, without punishment, without delay. Just reflection. This is why the shift is sacred, because it forces you to look at every hidden contract you've made with your past. The ones that say, if I shine too brightly, they'll leave me. If I rest, I'm lazy. If I speak my truth, I'll be abandoned. These aren't just beliefs. They're agreements, written into the code of your identity. And to shift timelines, you must rewrite those codes. Not through logic, through embodiment. You must become the one who shines unapologetically, the one who rests and thrives, the one who speaks and is loved. Not someday, now, not when it's convenient, but before it's proven safe, because the quantum field responds to conviction, not convenience. It reshapes itself for the bold, for the clear, for the ready. You are not waiting on the universe is waiting on you. To rise, to remember, to return to the frequency that was always yours. It is not outside of you. It never was. It is coded in your breath, your silence, your stillness, in the space between your thoughts. And in the moment you stop trying to chase what you desire and become it, you collapse the field, and reality bends. There is something strange about human memory. We tend to remember pain more vividly than peace. The argument before the apology, the failure before the lesson, the betrayal before the boundary. This tendency isn't a flaw, it's a survival strategy, wired into our biology to help us avoid danger. But in the modern world, it becomes a prison, because what helped us survive yesterday often keeps us from expanding today. You see, the brain clings to the familiar, even when the familiar is painful, because to the subconscious, predictable pain is safer than unpredictable joy. That's why healing feels like war, why growth feels like grief. You're not just learning new ways to live, you're unlearning everything that taught you to fear your own expansion. So many people try to step into new realities while dragging their old identity behind them. They speak of freedom but still live like captives. They chase abundance but still budget their joy. And the universe listens, not to their vision boards, but to the vibration of their being. This is why the shift begins in silence, not in ambition, not in willpower, in stillness. Because only in stillness can you hear the voice beneath the noise, the one that doesn't speak in words, but in knowing. That voice is not motivational. It is ancient. It's the part of you that existed before the wounds, before the roles, before the striving. And it's been waiting for you to stop searching outside of yourself long enough to feel it again. That's the return to coherence, where your thoughts match your truth, your actions reflect your integrity, your presence becomes your power, not because you've learned something new, but because you've remembered what was always there. Let me offer another real-world glimpse. There was a woman named Sophia who, for most of her life, dimmed her light. In every room, she played small. In every relationship, she made herself less expressive, less demanding, less visible. She was taught that being low maintenance made her lovable, that silence kept her safe. So she became excellent at disappearing. But at 39, something inside her snapped. Not loudly, quietly. It happened while washing dishes, staring out at her overgrown backyard. She realized she didn't recognize herself anymore. She had spent so long being agreeable that she'd forgotten how to desire. That night, she sat alone and whispered, "I want to live out loud." And the shift began, not in fire, but in gentle defiance. She started wearing red lipstick again. She rejoined her old dance group. She raised her prices at work, not because she needed more, but because she finally believed she deserved more. And as her inner frequency changed, her outer life adjusted. People left, new ones arrived, but most importantly, she stayed. For the first time in decades, she stayed true to herself. That was the shift. This is how reality bends, not through force, through fidelity, to the self you were always meant to become. And that version of you isn't hiding in the future. It's encoded in your body now, waiting to be activated. Every time you act from that place, even when afraid, you collapse the old wave of probability and birth a new one. That's not poetry, that's quantum mechanics. Particles don't collapse until observed, and timelines don't collapse until embodied. The field doesn't give you what you want. It gives you what you are. You cannot fake vibration. You can't trick the universe into giving you a life you secretly believe you're unworthy of. This is why so many techniques fail. Not because they're flawed, but because they're empty. No amount of scripting or visualization will override a core identity of shame. No vision board can compensate for a body that's still holding uncried tears and unscreamed truths. You cannot ascend by bypassing the body. You rise by reclaiming it, by coming home to your heart and asking, "What have I been silencing to make others comfortable?" Then listening and honoring the answer with your life. Quantum shift requires you to love yourself, not just in theory, but in form, in breath, in slowness, in sovereignty. To look in the mirror and not just say, "I am enough," but to live like you are. To stop over-explaining, to stop apologizing for existing, to stop outsourcing your worth to people who cannot see your soul. You don't need everyone to approve. You need you to return to your body, to your knowing, to your frequency, because only then can reality rise to meet you. There's a point in every awakening where the old world begins to fall apart. Not because life is punishing you, but because the frequency you once called home no longer fits. The friendships feel hollow. The conversations exhausting. The routines that used to comfort you now feel like cages. And this is where most people hesitate, because it feels like losing everything. But here's the truth few will tell you. You're not losing anything real. You're releasing the versions of yourself that were built on compromise. The people who only loved your silence. The jobs that rewarded your burnout. The roles that required your self-abandonment. This isn't destruction. This is alignment. The collapse you feel is a calibration. And the more you resist it, the more painful it becomes. But if you can learn to trust the tremble, if you can sit in the ashes long enough to listen, you'll hear the voice beneath your conditioning, the one that whispers, "This is who you've always been." The quantum field does not respond to what you mourn. It responds to what you magnetize. And magnetism requires space. Sometimes that space is carved by grief. Sometimes by stillness. Sometimes by surrendering the very identity you spent years perfecting. But always it begins with a choice to stop performing for a reality you've outgrown. To stop shape-shifting to fit into places your soul no longer belongs. To stop living for validation and start living in vibration. And that shift, it changes everything. Not all at once, but one small truth at a time. Until one day you wake up and realize the world feels different, not because it changed, but because you did. And the world is simply catching up. Let me take you to a real moment. A man named Julian once shared how, after his divorce, he spiraled. Not because he lost his partner, but because he lost his identity. He had spent years being the strong one, the provider, the fixer, and now, alone in an empty apartment, he realized he didn't know who he was without someone else to rescue. He began drinking. He stopped taking calls. He almost gave up entirely. Until one evening, he sat down, looked at his own reflection, and whispered, "Who am I without the performance?" That night, he wrote his first poem in 27 years. It wasn't good, but it was honest, and that honesty cracked open a portal. He began journaling, then sharing, then speaking. Now, Julian runs a men's circle that helps others grieve their unlived lives. Because when he stopped performing, he found his power. That is the shift. You are not here to maintain a carefully curated version of yourself. You are here to expand, to evolve, to experience the full spectrum of your soul. Not just the parts that are palatable, all of it. The rage that was never allowed. The tears that had no witness. The longing that was silenced. Quantum Shift invites you to stop editing yourself for acceptability, to stop negotiating your truth for peace that was never real, to stop withholding your power just to be loved by those who only knew how to love your mask. There will be moments in this journey when it feels like you're unraveling. You are, but not into chaos, into clarity. The unraveling is not failure. It's the shedding of everything false. It's the moment the caterpillar dissolves before becoming something new. There is no shortcut through this. Only presence, only practice, only faith in the invisible mechanics of becoming. Because the seed doesn't sprout by force, it sprouts by surrender. And you are no different. You are a seed of stardust and story, of longing and lineage, of pattern and potential. You are a vibration wrapped in form, and the moment you decide to rise, not as an act of rebellion, but as an act of remembrance, the universe rearranges itself to meet you, because the field is listening. Always. It is a strange thing to realize that your reality is not absolute, that what you call truth is often a habit, a pattern, a memorized version of the world filtered through past wounds, cultural scripts, and unconscious agreements. But the deeper you go into this work, the more you begin to feel it. Your reality is responsive, not fixed. And the moment you change the signal you emit, your entire world begins to listen. At first, the changes are subtle. You stop tolerating conversations that drain you. You stop saying yes when your soul screams no. You start noticing beauty again, in the texture of morning light, in the way your breath softens when you're alone. These are not small things. They are sacred symptoms of alignment, and alignment always precedes acceleration. You do not need to force momentum. You simply need to remove resistance. And most resistance doesn't live in your circumstances. It lives in your beliefs, in the internal architecture of your identity, in the invisible contracts that say love is earned through suffering. Success must be chased. Joy is unsafe. These aren't surface-level thoughts. They are frequencies coded into your cells. And to shift them, you don't need to fight harder. You need to listen deeper, because every unconscious belief began as a survival strategy, and every strategy can be replaced with safety, with breath, with gentleness. That's where the shift begins. Not in battle, but in reparenting yourself out of fear. Let me share a story that illustrates this perfectly. Matteo was raised in a home where spirituality was mocked. Logic ruled, emotions were inconvenient, dreams were distractions. By 25, he had a six-figure job and a panic disorder. Nothing was wrong on paper, but inside he was collapsing. One night, during a solo trip abroad, he stumbled into a local meditation class. not out of curiosity, but exhaustion. Something happened during that hour he couldn't explain. Not fireworks, not visions, just stillness. For the first time in his life, Matteo felt the space between thoughts, and he wept, not because of sadness, because of remembrance. A doorway opened that night, and he walked through it. Over the next year, he quit his job. He moved closer to nature. He studied trauma and breathwork. He began healing, not because someone saved him, but because he returned to himself. That's the real quantum work, not escape, embodiment. When people say, the universe as your back, they rarely explain what that really means. It doesn't mean life will give you everything you want. It means life will always mirror who you are, not who you wish you were, not who you pretend to be, but who you consistently embody, in thought, in tone, in vibration. And so the work becomes clear, not controlling outcomes, but curating coherence, making sure your intentions are echoed by your choices, making sure your words align with your walk, making sure your dreams are not being dragged down by a body still clinging to the past. Because the quantum doesn't care about your desires. It cares about your signal, and your signal is strongest when you are whole. You don't have to be perfect, but you do have to be honest. The shift doesn't require flawless affirmations or crystal clear vision boards. It requires integrity, a willingness to look at yourself without flinching, to feel what you've buried, to listen when your body says, no more, and to act from that listening, even when it's uncomfortable, especially then, because every time you act in alignment with your truth, you widen the signal. And the wider your signal, the more impossible it becomes for your old reality to hold. It breaks, it shatters, it surrenders, because it no longer has a frequency to feed on. And when the old world begins to dissolve, something strange happens. You start meeting new people, not just different, but resonant. You notice synchronicities, songs, signs, sudden openings. You experience clarity where there used to be noise. These are not coincidences, they are confirmations. Proof that the field has shifted. Proof that you have. There's a peculiar moment in every transformation. It's the space between who you were and who you're becoming. The in-between. It's not comfortable. It's not glamorous. It's quiet, disorienting, lonely. You've already let go of the old, but the new hasn't fully arrived. And here's where most people turn back. Because this in-between is where all your fears come to visit. The doubt, the imposter syndrome, the ache of not knowing what's next. But I'll tell you this, the in-between is sacred. It's the cocoon, it's the dark room where your new reality is developing, pixel by pixel. You are not lost here, you are incubating. So don't rush it. Don't try to define yourself too quickly again. Let the mystery breathe, because sometimes clarity isn't found, it's earned. Through stillness, through presence, through trust. In the quantum field, there is no straight line. Reality unfolds like a spiral, looping, tightening, rising. Sometimes it looks like you're returning to old patterns, but look closer, you're meeting them from a higher state. You're not the same, you're not reacting the same, and that is the work. Not escaping the pattern, but evolving within it, transcending it from the inside. That's what makes the shift permanent, because you've rewired your way through it. You've alchemized the old into the foundation of the new. And alchemy is never loud. It's subtle. It's spiritual engineering. It's choosing love where you once chose fear. It's breathing where you once braced. It's staying soft where you once shut down. I remember a story of a woman named Elena, a trauma therapist who, for years, helped others but never allowed herself to unravel. She knew the science of healing. She could quote every author, cite every method, but her own body frozen, tense, guarded. One day, in a client session, something cracked. Her client said, "I don't want to understand anymore. I want to feel." And those words hit her like lightning. That night, Alina went home, closed her books, turned off her mind, and simply sat with her own heart. No fixing, no labeling, just presence. She wept for hours, not from pain, but release. Years of armor dissolved, not because she found the perfect tool, but because she surrendered to her own becoming. Now, Alina teaches trauma not just from the mind, but from embodiment, because she let the shift happen through her, not just to her. You don't need to analyze your way into a new life. You need to feel your way forward. That doesn't mean you abandon logic. It means you reclaim instinct. You tune in to the wisdom below the words, to the signals in your body, to the intuitive nudges that don't make sense on paper but feel undeniably true. That is quantum intelligence. It doesn't shout, it whispers, and only those willing to slow down will hear it. The path of the shift is not paved with certainty. It's paved with devotion, to staying awake in discomfort, to walking toward the unknown with an open heart, to living in resonance with your soul, even when the world doesn't understand it. Especially then, because most people will not understand your transformation. They will miss the signs. They will think you're being distant, dramatic, irrational. That's okay. They weren't meant to see it. This isn't their becoming, it's yours. And one day, without force or noise, you will look around and realize your life has changed. Not just externally, but energetically. There's a lightness in your step, a calm in your chest, a deeper kind of power, not performative, but presence. Because you've stopped chasing timelines, you've become one. And the world has no choice but to match it. There comes a moment in every quantum shift when you no longer chase answers. You simply become the space for them. A stillness begins to bloom inside you, quiet, unassuming, unshakable. Not because your life is perfect, but because you've stopped resisting yourself. You stop arguing with your story. You stop measuring your worth in outcomes. You stop fighting to be seen by a world that was never meant to understand your depth. And in that surrender, the field opens. The synchronicities multiply. You begin to speak less and resonate more. You begin to trust, not the universe in some abstract way, but your own frequency. You realize, I don't have to prove that I'm ready. I only need to remember that I already am. The shift is never about achieving more, it's about aligning more fully. Every layer of you, mental, emotional, somatic, energetic, brought into coherence, not controlled, not polished, just honest. Because your frequency doesn't rise when you pretend to be light. It rises when you stop rejecting your shadow, when you hold space for grief without needing to solve it, when you honor your anger without becoming it, when you can sit with your inner child, not to fix her, but to be with her. That's how trauma dissolves. That's how timelines collapse. That's how freedom begins. Let me tell you about Amari. She grew up in a spiritual household. Mantras, altars, incense, everything on the surface looked aligned, but underneath it all, she carried the weight of perfectionism. She believed that in order to be worthy of the higher path, she had to be unshakably positive. So she buried her rage. She denied her desires. She built a persona that was graceful, calm, and hollow, until one day, during a breathwork ceremony, she screamed. Not a symbolic scream, a real, guttural, unfiltered scream from generations of silenced women. And for the first time, she felt her power rise. Not the manicured, spiritual kind, the primal, living, ancient kind. After that, she stopped calling herself a healer. She started calling herself a rememberer, and everything changed because she stopped trying to ascend and began to embody. That's the paradox of the shift. You rise, not by climbing upward, but by rooting deeper into your body, into your truth, into your being. And from that grounded place, you begin to experience what no affirmation alone could create: peace. Not the absence of pain, but the presence of wholeness. Peace that does not demand a quiet world, but arises from a quiet core. That is what changes your field. That is what bends reality. Not effort, not performance, presence. By now, the old self no longer feels like home. You might still glimpse its shadows, old patterns, old fears, old cravings, but you don't attach to them anymore. You greet them like ghosts. You smile at their return, and then return yourself to breath, to choice, to alignment. Because you are no longer building from reaction, you are creating from resonance. And the more you live this way, the more you begin to understand the secret. You are not here to chase outcomes. You are here to become the frequency that creates them. And that becoming is a ceremony. Every word, a spell. Every boundary, a prayer. Every truth spoken, a recalibration of the field, until life itself becomes your temple. And every moment, a reflection of your inner coherence. Something miraculous happens when you stop seeking the shift and start living it. You no longer need signs. You become the sign. You no longer wait for proof. Your life becomes the evidence. You walk differently, not faster, not louder, just clearer, more rooted, more open, more whole. People feel it when you enter a room, not because you demand attention, but because your frequency commands it. Silently, magnetically, without effort. That's the real manifestation. Not a car, not a relationship, not a number in your bank account, but a vibration that shapes reality around you like wind to a flame. Because you're no longer vibrating from need. You're vibrating from remembrance. This is the moment the shift becomes embodied. It's no longer something you're working toward. It's who you are. Not in moments of meditation, but in traffic. Not only in silence, but in noise. Not just in retreat, but in relationship. You've anchored the frequency. And now it expresses itself through your choices. You speak when you used to stay silent. You rest when you used to overwork. You trust when you used to force. Your nervous system is no longer bracing. It's available. Your emotions are no longer suppressed. They're honored. And your mind is no longer fighting to control life. It's learning to dance with it. Let me share one more story. Jin was a quantum physicist who privately suffered from severe depression. He understood energy, equations, the theory of superposition. He could explain how particles behaved in probability states, but he couldn't explain his own numbness. Until one night, staring out a hospital window after a near overdose, he whispered something so simple it cracked his reality open. What if the most important field I've ignored is me? That was the beginning. He returned to the basics, not formulas, but feeling. He started walking barefoot in the morning. He let himself cry when old memories surfaced. He meditated not to escape, but to inhabit his body again. And slowly, the scientist became the mystic. He didn't quit his field. He expanded it. He now teaches consciousness to physicists, helping them bridge the gap between mind and matter. Because the real shift doesn't ask you to abandon what you've built. It asks you to infuse it with soul. By now, you realize you were never trying to reach some distant reality. You were trying to return to yourself, the truest you, the one underneath the conditioning, the roles, the survival strategies, the one who never forgot the truth that you are the field. You are the signal. You are the shape the universe takes when love remembers itself. This is the end of seeking. the end of pretending, the end of postponing your aliveness for a future version of you to someday arrive. You're already here, and now everything that no longer resonates begins to fall away. Not because you pushed it out, because you no longer match it. That is the shift. Not a destination, a frequency, a tone, a way of being that rearranges the cosmos to mirror you. And now you understand, not intellectually, not as another concept to memorize, but as a frequency you felt inside your body, your breath, your bones. This was never about learning something new. It was about remembering something ancient, something sacred. You were never here to control the quantum. You are the quantum. You are the field. You are the waveform, collapsing and reassembling with every decision, every breath, every belief, not metaphorically, energetically, measurably, unavoidably. You were not born to fix yourself. You were born to recognize yourself, to wake up from the trance of unworthiness, to unhook from the lie that you need permission to be powerful, to be whole, to be free. You are not waiting for life to choose you. Life is waiting for you to choose it, and not the life you've inherited, the life you were coded for, the one pulsing beneath the surface of your everyday movements. It's been whispering all along, in the moments of quiet, in the ache behind your eyes, in the dreams you keep postponing. And now, finally, you've turned to face it, and it welcomes you home. There is no technique to memorize now, no mantra to chant until you forget what it means. The takeaway is simpler than all that. It is this: I am not chasing anything. I am becoming everything. And what I become becomes me. Let that live in your breath. Let it guide your tone. Let it shape your choices. Let it inform your silence. Because the field is listening, ways, and the more you remember, the higher you rise. But don't rise to escape. Rise to embody. You are not here to transcend this human life. You are here to inhabit it fully, to bring spirit into structure, to bring light into labor, to bring frequency into form. You are not a soul trapped in a body. You are a vibration in motion, a living field dancing with itself, a spark of the infinite, temporarily pretending to be small, but not anymore. Now, you walk as the one who knows it's already done. You speak as the one who remembers. There is nothing missing. You choose as the one who trusts. Every moment is sacred. You sleep as the one who rests not from fatigue, but from peace. And reality, it echoes you, faithfully, endlessly, because that is the law, that is the rhythm, that is the quantum shift.